public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View, the Millennial Roundtable. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. So grateful that you've decided to join us on this Wednesday, March 6th, 2019 day. So grateful on this Ash Wednesday that you have decided to join us. We've got quite a show for you. We'll be talking a little bit about the immigration issue. Maybe does it constitute an emergency? What is going down at the border right now? If you read the New York Times and Washington Post this morning, it seems as though there's some numbers that indicate there's some alarm that might be happening right now. So we're going to look at some of those numbers during the first part of our show, and then we'll transition over a little bit to talk about Michael Jackson. There's been some news as of late when HBO released their documentary, Finding Neverland, beginning on Sunday and then continuing on Monday. There's been quite an uproar over Michael Jackson and some of the allegations that are beginning to reemerge from some of the court cases that happened in the early 2000s. We'll take a look at that as well. And even just kind of on an ancillary note, there's an R&B artist, R. Kelly, as well, that went on Gayle King this morning. And again, he has some of the similar allegations that have been plaguing Michael Jackson. And so we'll share a little bit about that. And then obviously we've got to talk about just some tragic news that came out through government officials yesterday at the CDC, talking about the uptick in suicide, alcohol, and drug deaths that are reaching historic levels right now. We'll be talking about that as well. But I'll be talking about that with you all, as well as joining me at the roundtable. We got David Fraga. David, how are you, man?
Doing awesome. Glad to be here.
Oh, so good to have you here, man. So good to have you here to combat with me. Just know that and for our listeners, that you can't be here in the studio, but maybe you're watching on the whole television screen, or maybe YouTube or Facebook. I just need you to know something. Kirby Anderson is a saint of God. So you all are familiar probably with my sweet tooth. It's not even a sweet tooth. It's a lot of sweet teeth that I have. And this time of year is a reminder of God's goodness and grace, not only because we're remembering his crucifixion, burial, and resurrection, but also because there's these things called Peeps that are beginning to populate the stores. And Kirby Anderson knows that I love Peeps. And so if you're watching, you can see that he has provided me with 1, Peeps that are pancake and syrup, which are delicious. 2, root beer float. I've never had these before, but I am thoroughly looking forward to consuming these in one sitting and regretting life very shortly thereafter. And then 3, the fruit punch Peeps. Kirby's not even here in studio today, not even in the office, but he brought these over. Kirby, he's a great guy. Am I right?
Oh,
David?
totally, man. And you're smiling from ear to ear right now, man.
So here's the thing. So, you're supposed to go to the dentist every 6 months. And I try to go to the dentist as much as I can, especially because you all are getting a glimpse of kind of some of my dietary habits right now. But in celebration of a great dental appointment last Friday, what did I do? I had a box of Peeps right after that happened, because you don't want to eat beforehand, because you got to make sure that your teeth are clean. Somebody's got their hand down your mouth. And so I ate a box of Peeps. So I feel pretty good about that. But nevertheless, let's jump right into it, shall we? So literally this morning, it was on 2 newspapers. It wasn't just simply one. It was on 2 newspapers. The New York Times and the Washington Post highlighted the fact that immigration officials are calling the situation at the border reaching a breaking point right now. And so, reading from the New York Times, for the 4th time in 5 months, the number of migrant families crossing the southwest border has broken records. To continue on, it says that more than 76,000 migrants crossed the border without authorization in February. It's more than double the levels from the same period last year, and approaching the largest number seen in any February in the last 12 years. And so obviously, David, this brings up the idea of we continue to hear what's happening in Congress right now, whether they're going to block President Trump and his emergency declaration for what's happening at the border right now. And it seems like when you hear news like this, it kind of substantiates that. I don't know if it constitutes an emergency according to the law, but it does seem like it's increasingly becoming a source of tension as well as something that's worthy of consideration.
Yeah, so I think as I was reading through this and just, this morning thinking about this, I think the last time we ever had such a high peak of this was back in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And, man, especially all the people groups from Honduras and all the people groups from other Latin American countries trying to come in and migrate. But what do you think is the biggest issue here? I know that we're limited on agents. I know we're limited on a few resources there, but I've already sent troops down there and everything. So
I'm not a legal scholar, and I guess again, and I think some of our listeners are pretty aware. Like I don't know if it's necessarily right, but I really believe it to be true that when the founders created the separation of powers and differentiated between the various branches, there's a reason why Congress was the one that was supposed to be the ones that appropriated these funds. So I'm a little hesitant for an executive branch to be able to have those powers when, one, the Congress didn't give him that funds, didn't appropriate those funds for him to be able to utilize in that. And then two, for the executive branch, whether it's Donald Trump right now, President Trump in this instance, or whether it's President Obama when he did this in his instance, especially relative to what happened with the Iran deal. And so I'm a little hesitant, when a president, someone that's sitting in the Oval Office, is wanting to appropriate funds. But I will say that the situation down here at the border right now is very troubling, especially for those of us, we have listeners here that are in Texas area right now. It's just very troubling. So think about some of the numbers. There are 334 immigration judges right now that are trying to hear these cases of individuals that are making their way to the border, and there's upwards of 829,000 people I mentioned in the daily briefing this morning, according to some of the research. And so this is a very long line. So it's not like get to the back of the line. This is like quite literally the line is 829,000 people long. It is a long line right now, David.
Yeah, and I cannot believe that. That's years.
Yeah,
years. And you see these families are like, this is our last hope, trying to enter this country, but same time, you see the majority of them aren't single people, single fathers, men, whatever it is, but it's families.
Yeah.
So a lot of that is children as well. And so it just makes me wonder.
I think it's pretty clear, like, especially from the biblical narrative, we want to be able to obey the rules and the authorities that are put into place. But also we need to recognize that we are a democratic republic, and we have the capacity and the agency to be able to, one, change our law, change our officials, as well as those officials to be able to have the opportunity to modify our laws to be able to, one, to reflect whatever the spirit of the age is. I think hence the reason why you have the House of Representatives that's substituted and that's up for re-election every 2 years. But it is interesting. One of the things that I'm very concerned with, especially as just an individual that is I place a great emphasis upon law and order, is the social science is so clear. Economists are so clear. When the rule of law is heeded, when authorities are enforcing the law, prosperity abounds. So whether it's from an economical standpoint, or whether it's from a sociological standpoint, whether it's from a communal standpoint, when the rule of law is heeded and officials enforce the law and don't have sanctuary cities, there's prosperity that goes around. Now, I also recognize the truth that, and again, especially we live in an age in which the political narrative forces us to choose between either letting everybody in or letting no one in. And I don't think from a biblical perspective, we don't have to choose. We can do both, but not necessarily letting everyone in. But there is an opportunity for us to let more people in. But we need to know who is in, one, and two, we need to create laws, orderly system by which individuals can be checked, one, and two, that can go through a system by which they can legally enter the country. But we got to be back, and we'll continue talking about this right after the break.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, according to a new U.S. Census Bureau report, the millennial generation has been reversing some of the social trends that were true of previous generations. For example, about 1/3 of all millennials still live with their parents. They also apparently rely on them financially as well. The millennial generation is also postponing marriage, having children later, and buying homes later. Instead, they are pursuing education and various job opportunities. Many of these reverse trends have taken place recently. In 2005, only 25% of those between the ages of 18 and 34 lived with their parents. Today, that number is 34%. To put this in perspective, more people in this age group live with their parents than live with a spouse. Education is one reason for this remarkable change. Young women are much more likely to attain a college degree than just a few decades ago. They're also much more likely to have a full-time job. By contrast, young men are slightly less likely to be employed than in recent past. Another study done by the firm AgeWave in partnership with Merrill Lynch uncovered how much parents were financially helping their adult children. When mom and dad give their adult children $100 here and $200 there, it adds up. The average amount given is $6,800 annually. Some financial counselors suggest that parents reconsider this and instead shore up their own retirement nest eggs. Millennials are also marrying later in life. In 1976, 85% of women and 75% of men had been married by age 29. Today, only 46% of women and 32% of men say they were married before they turned 30. Instead, many more are living together. Cohabitation has grown 12-fold over the last 40 years. These trends show how the millennial generation is changing the world around us. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Thinking Man Films, Patterns of Evidence, The Moses Controversy. Did Moses write the first books of the Bible? Patterns of Evidence in theaters March 14th, 16th, and 19th only.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by David Fraga. We have been talking about the immigration issue, again featured on the front page of both the Washington Post as well as the New York Times this morning. The border officials are indicating that there is a breaking point that's happening right now. It's close to more than 76,000 migrants have crossed the border in a month right now. And we were talking about specifically, we're living in a world in which it seems as though if I'm just watching on cable news right now, I've got this zero-sum decision, or I've got a decision that I've got to make, a false dichotomy that is put before me, that I either, one, have to let everybody in, and walls are immoral on one side, or two, we can't let anybody in, and we've got to have these halts to immigrants from letting in. And especially from a Christian perspective, David, I just feel a tension in that, and maybe it's just my millennial mentality. Like I refuse to be put into any camp. I refuse the label, because when I'm reading the biblical narrative, I find a portion of both of those narratives to be compelling as well as biblical. The idea of, one, I need to obey the rules of the laws of the land, one, and so there must be the enforcement of the law of the land. Hence the reason, if we're a sovereign nation, there has to be borders, there has to be an orderly system, and an accounting of the individuals that are in here. But also, two, you have to read the Bible with your eyes closed to be able to not take away the idea that there is to be an inclination of compassion and love and graciousness that is shown to the stranger and the foreigner in this land. And so I'm living in this tension right now of just rejecting both of the options that have been given to me. And am I alone in this from a millennial perspective, or help me understand this?
Yeah, so it makes me wonder. I have to think back a little bit, especially when you see why they're trying to come into the States, right? And so on top of that, I mean, we see 829,000 people waiting, you know?
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's an insane number. You don't just go to the meat market, pull a tab and say, okay, I'm about to come up soon, I'll wait here.
Yeah.
You know, that's an insane amount of people. But I wonder also, like, you know, why do they want to come to the States? Because they're wanting a better life. They're wanting things better for the families and their generations to come. And when I think back to a biblical narrative, I think back to Abraham. When there was a famine, he saw, like, early in his apparently 75 years old, is young, so early in his age, he went to Egypt for a time. And during that time, you know, that's actually when he got much of his wealth, if you really read the biblical narrative. And then obviously he came back to Canaan. But all that being said, it makes me wonder, you know, those motives. You know, the States right now, they're doing well, but with all these undocumented immigrants, you see 16.7 to 22 million undocumented immigrants. They're producing in our economy, and so you see even more trying to come in. Is that going to be healthy? Is that a good stewardship on our end? So, like, that's another thing.
You bring up a great point, because one, I think you've got to strike down some of the preconceived notions that are part of this right now. I think one of the preconceived notions is that, yes, we are a country that has limited means, but we also recognize it to be true that we are living in a very prosperous time right now.
Yeah.
Our economy is blowing and going right now. It is red hot. If you want a job, there is a job. There's certain constituencies, especially certain sectors of industry right now, that are begging and looking for a work right now. There's just not enough workers to fill the jobs that are needed. I feel like every time I drive down the road, I see a trucker, and whenever I see a truck, there's a sign that says drivers wanted. Like, you can't go into a fast food place. You can't, I mean, job sites are continually saying there's jobs, there are jobs, there's so many jobs available. Right. So it's, and especially from a business standpoint, when they say that there's jobs available, when those jobs aren't filled, that's money left out. Like, there's just money left out in the field, left out. There's money that's not being secured, and so that's problematic.
Right.
But also, I think it's striking down, and so that's detrimental. But then it's also detrimental when we perpetuate this preconceived notion that the individuals that are coming into this country are all bad. Like, are there instances whereby there are certain illegal immigrants that commit heinous, evil crimes? Yes. And those that has been easily highlighted in certain stories, and it's so tragic, and I absolutely hate it. It's so disgusting. But it's not fair to project one outlier instance onto the entirety of the group. Like, just because from a Christian standpoint, I wouldn't want a non-Christian to just assume everybody that's a Christian is a member of Westboro Baptist Church. Like, that does not speak.
Right.
Like, I'm a conservative. I don't want everyone that's not a conservative to think that I'm a neo-Nazi, for goodness sake. Like, that's just not me. And so when you look at it, the research is very clear on this. Individual undocumented illegal immigrants, they commit lower crime levels than those that were born here in the country. They contribute upwards of $11.6 billion to the economy annually. They'll contribute more with taxes than they'll take away through services that are rendered over their lifetime. And so I think it's important for us, especially to strike down some of those preconceived notions. And so help me. So David, you're millennial. Your friends are millennials. Help us understand, because millennials are the largest voting contingent. We've got an election that's going to be coming up here before you know it. Yeah. So help us to understand, where do you think is the pulse of millennials right now when they consider what's happening at the border right now and the immigration issue? Where do you think the pulse is?
Yeah, so most of these guys that I know, they actually are, you know, immigrants who are legally documented. And so the way they feel is that they did it through the system correctly, even, you know, worked hard through it, whatever you want to say, and they're paid their dues. Yeah. And so for them, it almost feels unfair. I can't really speak too much for them because we haven't actually dug in too much into that topic. But one of the biggest things I would say is, like, they're just proud to be here. Yeah. And they're just wanting these guys to have the same opportunities. Yeah. It's not like we don't want them to. It's just like, okay, how can we even develop a better system, essentially, right?
Yeah, because again, I think that there's that piece that sometimes I think when we want to just be compassionate, I think some individuals will hear, well, being compassionate means tearing down any system, tearing down the walls, and just letting everybody in. And that's not what I'm saying. But there is implications because of this. And I want to here. I'll give a personal example for a second. So my primary institution where I work is Dallas Baptist University. It's been a killer week on campus, y'all. We've had Ross Perot Jr. was on campus just yesterday. Gave a phenomenal speech at the Christian Business Leaders Luncheon about the idea of pursuing after excellence while maintaining faithfulness. Just a brilliant, godly leader that's really doing some great work. We have David Dockery that's on campus right now. David Dockery is the president over at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, is a brilliant mind, and just a lot of great things. But one of the interesting things one of the unique facets of Dallas Baptist University is there's over 600 international students. Okay, so that's a significant number of international students representing over 60 countries on a campus that has around 5,000. So that's the largest percentage-wise population segment of international students on any campus here in the state of Texas, I believe. And so what's fascinating about this, though, is that you look holistically across the country right now, because of the kind of the visa system that is in array right now, there's instability relative to what students are going to be let in, what students aren't going to be let in to be able to study at American universities. What's happened is there has been a decrease nationwide in the number of immigrants that are coming here to study. So coming from, and this isn't just south of the border, this is China, this is the UK, this is what's happening in Germany and Brazil, et cetera. So there's a lot of play. But one of the fascinating things, and one of the neat things, especially about Dallas Baptist, there's a 7% decrease nationally, but there was an increase of 2% at Dallas Baptist University. So again, but that's just another implication when we're considering this immigration situation vis-a-vis border walls, vis-a-vis security officials, visas, for goodness sake.
Right.
That there's a number of implications that it's simply not just. It's good to know that it's not simply just individuals that are walking across and jumping across the border. It's also individuals that are wanting to fly here to come to universities like Dallas Baptist University to be able to learn in a place that integrates faith and learning. So there's implications that there's something to be merited.
Absolutely, and I think that's fantastic. I know there's a lot of international students at DBU, and I think it's amazing. But especially when you're starting to see, I feel like they're being more specific on where they're going. Yeah. Especially when you see they're coming from these countries that are very different culturally, but they're trying to want to have that American experience, but with more specific. DBU has an amazing international program. I know that. So,
I think it's just good for us and again, this is where. This is not a President Trump issue. Sometimes I think we can become so consumed with just the executive branch, which, especially from a conservative perspective, is just kind of oxymoronic. That's not what we do. This is a congressional issue because Congress really has the power to be able to do some significant changes and some good stuff through here. But we've got to take a break. I'm actually looking up at the clock. I'm looking at Andrew, one of our producers, and he's he's looking up at the clock. He's recognizing we're going up on a break. You can actually lead out of the break. But now I've talked too much about the break that I got to take the break now. And so when we come back from the break, we'll continue the immigration conversation relative to some of the implications from that. We'll be back right after this.
There is no more dangerous time than when things are going well. Remember Elijah on Mount Carmel? Fire came down. There was no doubt who was God, but what happened next? He went from amazing faith to a time of great fear and depression. Many Christians have been very thankful a certain Democratic candidate for president was not the one to nominate 2 replacements for the Supreme Court. But as with Elijah, times of great victory are also times of great danger. Moments like this are not the time to take it easy. This is not the time to let our guard down. This is a time to double down on our work in the community, to serve and pray and plan and invest in a better future. This is the time to join Point of View's Truth Team 360 to make sure today's promising gains are not lost tomorrow. Show your commitment to our future by visiting pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Ask to join the Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
Hey, and welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. So grateful that you have decided to join us on this Ash Wednesday as we begin the Lenten season. I'm joined here at the Millennial Roundtable by David Fraga. We've been talking a little bit about the immigration issue. And David, I think one of the things that an important thing for us to consider relative to the immigration issue is one, just the feeling, the tension of wanting to, one, obey the rule of the law, 2, wanting to heed the biblical command relative to the idea that we are to extend compassion to the foreigner. I mean, there's a you can go everything from Deuteronomy 10 to Exodus 23 to Exodus 22 to Matthew 25 to Hebrews 13. Like there's just a litany of verses in the biblical narrative placing an emphasis upon the foreigner. So it's a false dichotomy to say that we have to choose one over the other. And we feel this tension. But I think one of the interesting things that I want to hear from you is the lack of the application of the biblical narrative on immigration issues inside the church. I understand Americans aren't going to be looking to the biblical narrative or be influenced by the biblical narrative relative to their political decisions, but I would expect Christians to be influenced by the biblical narrative relative to some of their political positions. But the research doesn't indicate that. And so one of the studies I always go back to is the Lifeway study that was put out that indicated that only 9% of Christians said that the biblical narrative influenced their immigration views. Now, when you hear that number, and especially from your millennial standpoint, how does it fall on you? Does it fall like that's a pretty low number, or maybe it's a pretty high number with some of the conversations that you have with your friends as well as just individuals in your church?
Yeah, yeah. Just hearing that statistic for the first time, I'm not sure what I think about it quite yet. Okay. I'm someone who likes to process those things because you can throw statistics out at almost anything, right? But in order to see how it actually lines up into reality, you just got to see how it plays out at times. All that being said, within the church, I think, in the midst of chaos, it can almost seem hopeless in how to respond and reach out to some people, or especially talking about certain issues that you don't know in your congregation who this is going to actually impact, right, per se, because who knows who's within the congregation is the congregation itself. The pastor can preach anything he wants, but almost anything he wants. But the fact is, how are we stewarding our messages, and how are we helping these people who maybe are, immigrants, and actually loving them well? It can be so hard at times to love certain people coming from different cultures, because it's like, why don't you understand this? Why don't you get it?
So do you think it's less? Do you think the greater problem isn't necessarily people aren't being informed by the biblical narrative relative to immigration issues? The greater problem is that they simply just don't interact with immigrants. They don't have interactions with individuals that are outside of their ethnicity. Yeah,
I think at times they're like outcasted, and so even those immigrants themselves will start their own churches at times, and they're small churches, they're great churches, spirit-filled churches, but it's almost like for example, DBU, we talked about that earlier. I think one of the hardest things that I talk to most of my student athletes, or talk to most of the guys, my friends, is it's hard for them to connect with a lot of international students. I think one of the best things to do that with is I actually ran international soccer with some of my friends, and that was the easiest way to connect. But it's not like we didn't want to reach out to them. It's more like, how can we? Because the way we want to hang out is maybe a little bit different, but we're actually not so different. It's a really hard approach, and it's something that we're trying to understand more. I know I have.
Yeah.
So
it's a really high bar to be able to connect with someone from a different culture, right? I was reading a book called Alienated America, Tim Carney's new book, which I highly recommend. And he gives a little anecdote in this book, and he talks about how I believe he's in Maryland. He's right outside of D.C. I don't know if he's right on the Maryland side of D.C. or on the Virginia side. What he talks about is it's a very diverse church that he's with. There's various different individuals from different ethnicities as well as different cultures that go to this place. But he also recognizes that he's just got neighbors as well. And so one of the things that he wanted to do was to know his neighbor, because it's really hard to love your neighbor if you don't know your neighbor. And so he's trying to connect with one of his neighbors. And I guess one of the classic American ways to be able to do that is to, hey, and he said, you want to go grab a beer? Do you want to go grab a drink? And he was like, no, well, I don't drink. Well, do you want to come over and I'll barbecue? No, I'm sorry, I don't eat meat. I don't eat this particular type of meat. Until eventually he said that after a series of back and forth over a couple of weeks, he finally just said, why don't you just come over and I'll have some lemon water for us to be able to enjoy. And he was like, yeah, okay, well, we can do that. And so all that to say, there's such a high barrier high barrier to be able to connect with individuals that are a little bit different than you.
Right.
That sometimes it can be real, which makes it really easy to demonize and to put these preconceived negative notions on individuals when you don't know them. But there's such a high barrier to know them. That's another reason why we're finding this tension right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of, so what I was thinking as you were saying that was the biblical narrative with, Jesus talking to the Samaritan woman. You see the Good Samaritan. You see how in the biblical times, you see the separation of the people groups. And it's like, I don't want to, open my home to them. But obviously they had different reasonings. Well, you can almost, parallel that with us today. It's like, okay, where's the trust in this?
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is like opening of your home.
Oh, yeah.
Literally what you just said, opening of your home, inviting them in. But a lot of times it's like, oh, they're from a different country, or they may see something else differently. And so they actually might take advantage of me.
Do you think that's a common sentiment?
Yeah, actually,
think so?
I think so. And we can even talk about this even more. But
go on. Share why you think it's so prevalent. This is fascinating.
I think it's common because people love their privacy, quote unquote, and they love to. They rather say things or bring to the table things that are just like, I don't have to give of myself or risk anything in order to love someone in the way the Bible loves. Right? It's kind of like the unconditional love, right? God. He loves us unconditionally with his whole heart. And he's like, here it is. You can choose it or not.
Yeah, so that's a fascinating sociological perspective, just because, especially coming from the South, hospitality was such a significant characteristic in the South. I'm picturing my grandmother right now, and my grandmother would, if somebody came to the door, she would invite them in. She would have sweet tea that's sitting on the counter, because sweet tea is never supposed to be put into a refrigerator. You're supposed to put it on the counter, and then you're supposed to put ice in the cup to be able to let it cool. You never put sweet tea in the refrigerator. She would pour them a glass of sweet tea, and there was always some type of dessert that's at her house. Right. And it was seen as a faux pas. It was seen as wrong to not eat her food that she presented to you. And so you're saying that we're living in a world today where that type of hospitality is on the decline, and privacy is of such an extent that it would keep us from allowing people to come inside.
Well, it's territorial. I mean, in the midst of chaos, what do you tend to do? Yeah. You tend to grab everything you can, bunker down a lot of times, or especially when you see in the midst of chaos, here, let's rewind a little bit. Going back to church, right? So you see how you want the church to be more involved in the community. Yeah. But depending on what community you're in, if you have kids or if you don't have kids, if you have something to lose or you don't have something to lose, then why would you risk yourself? I think one of the biggest things is when Jesus was talking about, man, when you open the door to like a stranger and you feed them and all those things, like you're actually doing that to me, right? Yeah. So I personally don't see enough of that. Yeah. I'd love to see more of that. And when I can empower and tell people, hey, let's do more of this, let's do it. But Southern hospitality, man, that could go either way.
Yeah. That's because again, that's a fascinating take. But I mean, I could see where you might think this, because I think some of our listeners would probably be shaking their heads and saying yes, simply because, and you brought up kids as prime example. The research is very clear, and some of the anecdotal research is very clear relative to kids being a very easy pathway to get to know your neighbors, right? Like we're both at the playground together, or our kids are at playing Little League together. That serves as it's almost like a conduit to be able to connect with adults your age. And so, and it's clear that the birth rate is falling right now. So we're not having kids as highly as we used to. The birth rate has fallen over, I think, the past 2 or 3 years. And so if you're stripping away one of the conduits by which individuals connect with one another, as well as exercise hospitality to each other, I think that does merit consideration, especially from your point of saying that we're just largely we're not having people over to our home anymore, which I think is so detrimental, which it has various implications because of that. I think about some of my family, like I am who I am because of one, my family, but also two, some of the neighbors. Like neighbors had such a positive benefit on me and shaped me even though my parents were raising me to a great degree. So, nevertheless, we've got to take a break right now. But when we come back from the break, we're going to continue talking about this immigration issue. And I think we're going to go in the direction of othering. And so I'm really interested in not just talking about taking care of our kids, but their kids as well. What does that look like relative, and even from a crazy perspective, from the pro-life position? We'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. 2 new cadets at the United States Military Academy at West Point do not want to wear the tar bucket. If you're not familiar with the uniform of West Point cadets, when on parade, cadets wear a plumed shako hat, or as they are commonly called, a tar bucket. The cadets object to wearing the hat because it would force them to remove their turban. That is a problem chiefly because the cadets are Sikh and the turban is a religious observance for the men. So while the United States Army has provided accommodation for Sikh soldiers in the past, this new lawsuit questions whether that accommodation need extend to the parade grounds. And it is an interesting question. Clearly, forcing the cadets to remove their turban would be, in the words of the cadets, blasphemous. Yet there is something to the tradition and uniformity found in the military dress of our nation's military academies. Congress, thankfully, has helped provide guidance in the settling of such matters. In the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, Congress insists that the government identify its compelling interest and restrict the free exercise of religion in the least restrictive manner possible whenever a citizen alleges a substantial burden to his free exercise of religion. RFRA does not guarantee an outcome in any case, but it does make the government justify its behavior. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Guide at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
So where do we move from here, David? I guess you're used to me starting out by introducing myself again, and that's probably protocol. So this is Nick Pitts. I'm joined by David Fraga at a Millennial Roundtable here on the Point of View radio show, and now we've been talking about immigration for 3 segments. I've been getting kind of depressed, or I don't want to say depressed. I've been getting kind of down simply because the situation is very dire, I would say, right now. We've got more individuals that are crossing the borders right now. Some of them, many of them, are doing so because they're running away from something, not necessarily running to something. They're trying to find respite here in the U.S. But what you're contending is that Americans largely are othering them. It's the idea that they don't know them and hospitality isn't being exercised. There are less Alices, which is my grandmother's name, out there in the world that are willing to offer sweet tea and open up their home to these individuals that they don't know, to try to get to know them and to show the love of Jesus to them. And so how do we go? What do we do, David? Like, there's got to be something, especially for our listeners, to know steps that they can take. Because right now we see these huge numbers, almost 100,000 people that are crossing the border right now, which is just more than one person can fathom. right? It's just way too big a number. It's the compassion fatigue piece. We understand that we have such a little piece that we can play relative to the electoral process. What can we do specifically with regards to the immigration issue that can empower us but also glorify God?
Well, that's a loaded question, man.
Of course.
I mean, there's so many. I guess you could say there's so many things you could say for solutions, and I mean, I don't think we should get so overwhelmed with just the whole problem, because then that could stress us out and we end up just not doing anything a lot of times. But first of all, one of the biggest things that I started acknowledging and started just sharing with my friends, sharing with the people around me, is just opening your home, just inviting them into your lives in the sense of, hey, let's go grab some lunch. Hey, come over to my house. We're gonna have some breakfast and hang out. I want to get to know you. I want to get you involved and get you connected to where I'm surrounded in. Even if their professional jobs are from 9 to 5, like, hey, what are you doing on the weekends? Things like that. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've seen a lot of productivity in, and a lot of just taking steps forward to, a variety of culturally sound people, right? All that being said, it is hard to do that at times. Why? Because we liked our rhythms. We like our, schedules a lot as Americans. We like our jobs, our families, whatever it is. We do have those priorities. And so what does it look like to continue doing that? And a lot of times it's just simply inviting them into an activity, simply inviting them into your dinner table, right? Like I mentioned before, Dr. Tony Evans talks about how the best thing to do is being intentional at the dinner table, which is why he contributes a big part of why his kids are so successful, and just being world changers now. They would invite whoever they're dating, they would invite their friends, just simply as that.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, there is power around a dinner table, right? And I think even like it's kind of funny. I don't know if you can relate with this. Growing up, going out to eat was kind of a big deal in my family's life. Like we would probably go out to eat maybe twice a week. I bet 2 times, 3 times. Now, granted, part of that was my mom would cook pretty frequently, and she was a pretty good cook. And then also, I was in a very small town in Cookeville, Tennessee, and so there were restaurants, obviously, but there weren't as many restaurants as here in the Dallas area. And whenever we went out to eat, there was usually a pretty long line, anywhere from an hour to 2 hours at times to be able to get into a restaurant. So there was always, those were kind of disincentives from being able to go out to eat. But now I'm moving away from a world in which going out to eat is special and kind of staying home to eat is the norm, to now I feel like the vast majority of my meals are out to eat. Like I'll either eat a protein bar, because I want to work, and so protein bar is really easy to work and do that, or 2, I'll just go out to eat. It's a rare occasion to actually eat a meal at home, at a dinner table with my roommates, and especially even more so if we invite people over to our home. Right. And so I feel like at least from a millennial perspective, and I would even argue just from a sociological 2019 American perspective, it's a very special thing to cook a meal and then eat it at your table, not at your couch, not in front of the TV while it's going on and you're watching The Bachelor. No, like to eat a meal at your table with the people in your house, and then making it super special and putting the cherry on top, inviting people over. I feel like that's like crazy special, especially for millennials. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. And I too come from a small town, and my mom cooked all the time. And so when we'd go out, fancy dinner for us, we had at one point, a family of 7, would be Cracker Barrel.
Okay.
So, I mean, hey.
You're welcome. Cracker Barrel is Lebanon, Tennessee headquarters, so you're welcome, America.
Hey, yeah, we're so happy about that. But, and I agree. So I think it depends also the setting, the cities. Dallas, of course, it's massive.
Yeah.
So it is just easier, especially trying to live that fast-paced life, to go out to eat. But even that, I mean, just inviting them to that.
Yeah.
And then being like, hey, let's come over to my house. Let's hang out. Whatever it is. Most people, especially young adults, they are wanting to be a part of something.
Yeah.
100%. Even if it's as simple as like, come over and let's just play video games. Be like, what? Video games? Yeah, heck yeah. So just little things like that. It doesn't have to be so grandiose as cooking a meal.
Yeah.
Unless you really want to do that. rarely I would do that. I'd like throw some pizzas in the oven, or something like that.
I think, like again, nobody wants me to cook. No one has ever invited me to cook. They've invited me to watch the Food Network with them. And again, I don't really like to watch TV, so that's a whole another story. But there is power. I mean, even the social science research behind this, and I know I continue to say this, like there is power, like individuals that are eating meals at their home, especially with kids, like the less likely to do drugs, less likely to get in trouble with the law, more likely to have a more expansive vocabulary, a greater economy of words. Like there's just so many upticks there's so many upticks and positive benefits for sitting around a table at mealtime. And I think one of the things that is kind of the glaring issue is, there's just a variety of schedules from a variety of different times, and there's so many differentiating factors that we all have in our lives that make us so different. But by and large, the vast majority of people are eating lunch around 11 to 2 or eating dinner around 5 to 8 or 9. And why not, if they've already got to have these calories to give them energy to make it through the day or to make it to the end of the day, why not invite them over and try to, whether it's like modifying that for the allergies or whatever it is, just providing an opportunity to invite them in, and in turn, who knows, you may be entertaining angels in this particular moment.
Absolutely. And part of that's like the first step of, honestly, being vulnerable and trusting someone is inviting to something that, I mean, you're already doing. Now, the next step is being intentional in conversations and what you, just loving him the way Christ has loved us, right? And it's so important. I mean, Jesus talks about breaking bread all the time in the Gospels, but like he just said, and they broke bread and blessed it, you know, all the time. And so you see how important that is, especially with the disciples asking how to pray, being discipled by Jesus. And man, you can go on and on, man.
Broke bread. Now the question is he a Subway sandwich artist?
Oh man, here we go.
Or is he more along the lines of, I like to think more Jesus was a Firehouse Subs guy.
Jersey Mike's
up there. Man, no, I'll go ahead and say this. I think I've said this before, and I'm sorry, I might get in trouble for this. I don't understand anyone that eats Subway. It just smells so bad. It just is so bad. And individuals, especially Christians, that are called to be the fragrant aroma. Never mind. No, I like Subway. The grilled chicken sandwich is delicious. I eat protein bars most of the time. Nevertheless, we got to take a break. But when we come back from the break, we're going to get into this Michael Jackson saga, some of the implications that are coming from it, and then talk more about it. But we'll be back right after this.
Why should you become a partner with Point of View Radio? Because for decades, this team has made a significant difference in lives and communities across the nation. Because America is dying for lack of biblical wisdom about life and culture. You should give because your gift will make possible cutting-edge information on issues that matter, information you won't hear anywhere else. Why? Because your gift will change lives, because you'll influence our culture with biblical truth, and because you can make a difference for the future. Our nation needs a truth team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Click on Join the Truth Team and choose your level of support. Pointofview.net. Or call 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View for this second hour. I am your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by David Fraga. We're so grateful that you decided to join us on this Ash Wednesday, March 6th, 2019 day. And we've had quite a show already. We dove in a little bit on the immigration issue and really just had a fascinating conversation that you're going to want to go back to the Point of View website, pointofview.net, and catch up on the podcast, as well as various other ways that you can listen to us. But one of the things that we were talking about is just how both the New York Times and the Washington Post were talking about these alarming numbers, reported these alarming numbers this morning on their front pages relative to the number of individuals that are crossing the U.S. right now, and they indicated that the border is at a breaking point as more than 76,000 migrants cross in a month. Estimates ranging upwards of 780,000 illegal immigrants will cross the border this year, and the number hasn't been that high in almost a decade. And so does this constitute a crisis? And so we kind of worked through the implications of that, gave some numbers and context surrounding that, as well as tried to figure out the biblical perspective on the immigration issue, feeling ourselves in the tension, one, of recognizing that laws and rules are beneficial and good, not only because the Bible commands us to obey and honor those that are in authority, but also to recognize that just a cursory reading of the biblical narrative, you come away with the need to and the directive from the biblical scriptures to be able to show compassion. And so what does it look like when the political narrative forces you to choose one over the other, but the biblical narrative says do both? And so we kind of explored some of those issues. And now we're going to transition here in the second hour. We're going to be talking about a couple of things that I'm really interested in. I think it's just been things that have been percolating out into the environment. One, specifically Michael Jackson. And so the Finding Neverland documentary that's aired on HBO starting on Sunday and making its way into Monday. Then Oprah, I believe last night or maybe the night before, had a special that aired on TV that talked about, she had just a crazy, just a really moving show where she brought in all of these abusers that filled the audience, or those that had been abused in their past filled the audience, and talked about some of the allegations that were coming forward from Michael Jackson. So we'll share a little bit about that, how it's causing, how the reemergence of Michael Jackson onto the popular culture screen is causing some to dig their heels in, and despite the evidence, to be able to offer a response and to be able to defend his legacy, while others, on the other hand, are beginning to speak out on this. And you can't mention Michael Jackson right now without going one degree of separation over to R. Kelly as well. This contemporary R&B artist found himself on CBS News this morning with Gayle King, or CBS This Morning rather, Gayle King interview that has just turned into an explosive interview that's gone viral. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then I'm really interested to talk about the uptick in deaths concerning suicide, alcohol, and drugs. CDC officials released a report yesterday that indicated that we're starting to see historic spikes in some of these. And so we'll be talking a little bit about that as well. But joining me to talk about these issues is the one, the only David Fraga here in Dallas. David, you doing well?
Doing awesome, man.
Man, so good, so good. And so David will be joining us, as well as we'd appreciate if you have your comment or question that you'd like to call in. You can do so at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. And if you are someone that can endure a great amount of punishment, you can watch this show, and you can do so on the Facebook page. And so facebook.com/pointofviewradio, or over on YouTube as well. The YouTubes, usually I just look for viral videos on YouTube's and Travis Tritt music videos, but that's a whole different subject. So I won't talk about Travis Tritt and how it's a great day to be alive, but rather we'll just talk about some of the issues in the news of the day. So let's jump into it, shall we, David? I think one of the things that we just have to talk about right now is Michael Jackson. And specifically, that was kind of our second story of the day, is that 3 Canadian radio stations are banning Michael Jackson's music. Their 3 radio stations out of Montreal have stopped playing Michael Jackson songs as a result of the allegations that surfaced yet again against the late musician Michael Jackson, and that was aired on the HBO documentary. And it's fascinating that David, that these allegations obviously have been around for over 10 years.
Yeah.
Over 10 years. And this has been going on for at least 20 years. These things have been surfacing right now. But now we're starting to see a backlash to this, and one has to wonder, is this the beginning of the end for the legacy of Michael Jackson?
See, I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
Just because, he's been making music since,
a long time.
A long time.
Yeah, ABC, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, come on. And so you see people who admire him for his music, of course, but obviously, outside of that, even growing up, we've always heard of things going on that should definitely not be going on, right? Yeah. But this is just decades, man, decades of this stuff. So, like, what kind of legacy is he leaving behind? Obviously, there is a legacy of great music. He was revolutionary in his time, but you also see that there's a legacy of just a lot of brokenness. There's a lot of just people who have been hurt from the things that he has done. But he's also brought a lot of what culture is today in terms of music and acceptance and all that.
So you've got individuals, you've got entities, we'll say, like the radio station, that have started to silence him. And I'm looking it up right now that even just recently, as an hour ago, there were some radio stations in New Zealand that decided to nix him now as well. So they're going to silence him as well. But then on the other side, you've got individuals that are starting to speak up for him. So you have, for example, former child actor Corey Feldman has come out and said that this is a public lynching, in his words. You've got one fan club wrote yesterday how they are disgusted, quote, disgusted by the false accusations that continue to be repeated in an attempt to denigrate the reputation of our friend and to cash in on some small interaction with his life, end quote, in reference to the Finding Neverland documentary, or Leaving Neverland documentary. One of the things, like, I'm so fascinated, David, is that Michael Jackson is a cultural icon.
Yeah.
I don't know if I fully appreciate it, especially from the millennial perspective. Historically, I know it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I can fully grasp the cultural impact that he had and he continues to have, with everything from Billie Jean, Beat It, Smooth Criminal, Dirty Diana, The Way You Make Me Feel. Like, he has so many hits. And I think in turn, because he has so many hits and he has such a loyal fan base, what we're beginning to see is that there's the confirmation bias that they love him so much, and the good that he did will cause them to not even be able to cause some individuals to not even be able to see the bad that he's allegedly done as well. And that numerous individuals, upwards of 13 individuals, I believe, have come forward and said that he's done significant harm to them. So I'm just perplexed by this, and I've got a couple of working theories as to why individuals would continue to advocate for him. And I'm also wondering how far this is going to go. So I've got a couple theories, but I'd love to hear from you. So you can call in if you have a theory as to why individuals continue to stand up for him, or you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212, or facebook.com/pointofviewradio. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, according to a new U.S. Census Bureau report, the millennial generation has been reversing some of the social trends that were true of previous generations. For example, about 1/3 of all millennials still live with their parents. They also apparently rely on them financially as well. The millennial generation is also postponing marriage, having children later, and buying homes later. Instead, they are pursuing education and various job opportunities. Many of these reverse trends have taken place recently. In 2005, only 25% of those between the ages of 18 and 34 lived with their parents. Today, that number is 34%. To put this in perspective, more people in this age group live with their parents than live with a spouse. Education is one reason for this remarkable change. Young women are much more likely to attain a college degree than just a few decades ago. They're also much more likely to have a full-time job. By contrast, young men are slightly less likely to be employed than in recent past. Another study done by the firm AgeWave in partnership with Merrill Lynch uncovered how much parents were financially helping their adult children. When mom and dad give their adult children $100 here and $200 there, it adds up. The average amount given is $6,800 annually. Some financial counselors suggest that parents reconsider this and instead shore up their own retirement nest eggs. Millennials are also marrying later in life. In 1976, 85% of women and 75% of men had been married by age 29. Today, only 46% of women and 32% of men say they were married before they turned 30. Instead, many more are living together. Cohabitation has grown 12-fold over the last 40 years. These trends show how the millennial generation is changing the world around us. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Thinking Man Films, Patterns of Evidence, The Moses Controversy. Did Moses write the first books of the Bible? Patterns of Evidence in theaters March 14th, 16th, and 19th only.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Hey, welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined by David Fraga here on the Millennial Roundtable, Point of View. We have been talking a little bit about Michael Jackson and specifically some of the reaction that's come from this Finding Neverland piece. I don't know why I keep on calling it Finding Neverland. It's Leaving Neverland. We found Neverland. We've been shocked by Neverland. We've been disgusted by Neverland. Now we're trying to figure out how to leave Neverland. But what we found is a reemergence of Neverland, specifically known as which is referred to as the property that Michael Jackson abided on while he was still here with us. And we've been talking about some of the fallout that's happened because of this documentary that has aired on HBO and continues to send shockwaves and ripples. And I think one of the interesting things, David, that I am captivated by is the idea that individuals, even though they know the wrong that he's done and the horrors that have been perpetuated, they continue to speak up for him. Right. They continue to admire him and the fascination with him. And then you contrast this with what's happening with R. Kelly right now. R. Kelly, who continues to have his own legal troubles right now relative to his sexual abuse of teenage girls and kids, and just younger girls, and the things that he did to them, and in turn how so many, like Spotify's put him off some of their playlists. There's been radio stations that have stopped playing some of his songs, and the backlash against R. Kelly has been so swift and has been so extensive. Whereas the backlash against Michael Jackson has been so hesitant, as well as been almost to a certain degree non-existent in some instances as well. And so I would be interested. I'm gonna let you think on this, but I also want some of our listeners. Why is it that individuals, one, refuse to call him out for what he's done, or two, look the other way towards the things that he's done and just instead concentrate on the good things that he did relative to music education or to Man in the Mirror or Thriller. We'd love to hear from you. So you can call in 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or you can go on Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. We'd love to hear from you. Why do you think, what leads individuals to overlook some of these allegations against Michael Jackson? Be sure to call in or leave a little note on the Facebook page. So, David, up to you now. Lead us off. Rationale, working theory, hypothesis as to why individuals are turning the other way relative to Michael Jackson and his allegations.
You look at someone like R. Kelly, and did he really shape a lot of the pop culture like Michael Jackson did?
Oh, no way. No way. From
exactly.
a professional standpoint,
yeah.
Michael Jackson is leaps and bounds
exactly.
and moonwalks above R. Kelly. But we've seen the allegations are similar.
Right.
And regardless of whatever your merit you've done or the achievements you've had in the professional realm, these type of allegations and this type of behavior, there should be no. I have very strong views. I think having a little 4-year-old niece has radically made me very extreme and low tolerance for individuals that would harm children. But keep on going. Why do you think individuals are looking the other way?
Well, you see someone like, when you look into Michael Jackson in these cases and you look into R. Kelly in these cases, you see obviously leaps and bounds of influence, quote unquote, power in a sense. You see how I was reading your daily briefing, and there's like 10 undeniable facts, and you see how Michael Jackson would take care of these families financially. He would take care of them, whatever they needed, kind of deal. As long as he could do what he could do, hush hush, keep it on the DL, kind of deal. Mm-hmm. And R. Kelly, I don't know if he did those things, but even I'm not saying you should do those things, right? But like, you see how Michael Jackson MJ was trying to justify by like saying, hey, but I'm taking care of you, it's kind of a give kind of thing. And on top of that, he was someone who, impacted a lot of these families' lives and honestly was trying to better them in a way. Mm-hmm. But it's just, man, I'm not 100% sure how to approach this.
I just don't understand. Like I literally don't. And again, like you can go to the daily briefing, thebriefing.net, or you can jump over to Point of View website. And I just don't understand how individuals can look over some of these allegations and still, I love his music. Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I'll just be honest. I haven't stopped listening to his music, but I can't look past some of these wrongs that even if he wasn't convicted in the court. What are the some of the things that are the undeniable facts of what he exposed children to. And what was it like? It's sickening. And so my working theory is that there's just a confirmation bias, is the sociological term, where individuals just have this inherent, such a strong, robust bias that they're able to look away from these things or to rationalize away these things. And so I guess it would be similar to if someone told me that my mom did something wrong or my mom said something wrong. Like initially, I would completely discount you because my mom is a saint. Now, if she's listening to this, please don't. Please lower the volume for a second, Mom. But like my mom is she's a saint, and so I would never. If somebody said something negative about my mom, like I would just say, I have years of history of my mom just being such a servant-hearted and loving woman. I would say you must have looked at another woman that's 5'4" and is spunk. Like there's no way that would be my mom. And I guess to a certain degree, these individuals have a confirmation bias to the extent that they just are so enveloped with Michael Jackson that they don't see some of the wrong and they can only see what's right. So I guess that's one way to think about this. But nevertheless, we'd love to hear from you. And now there's a lot of you that are calling in. And so if you'd like to call in, why do you think people are looking past some of the allegations that have been leveled against Michael Jackson right now? We'd love to hear from you. 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212. Let's jump on over to Georgia right now. We've got Teresa in Georgia. Are you there, Teresa?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Teresa, what's your point of view?
My point of view is this. as a Christian woman, if Michael did what he did, Michael been dead, like 5-6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
If it was about Michael, let him, well, actually, Michael's dead.
Yeah.
And we do have a just judge.
Mm-hmm.
If Michael did do what he did, you know, back when or whatever, God is the judge. He's taking care of that. But these guys come in, years and later, it's about money. We really don't, I don't care about Michael. He's gone. He's a human being. Just imagine the rest of the people that don't have money, that's molested their own children, mom, dad, whoever. God is just uncovering R. Kelly, Michael, and every other whoever that haven't been exposed yet. But it's been long gone. Now they say, well, we didn't tell on Michael because why? So it's about money. Let Michael be dead and gone, and we need to move on in life. You know, it's a lot of more people that's here living that's molesting children, that's molesting their own children. If walls can talk, God will expose more people other than Michael.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let Michael be dead. The Bible said, "Let the dead bury the dead."
Yeah.
So if regardless of who and what, let it go.
Yeah, well,
Let it go.
Thank you so much, Teresa. You do bring up a really great point. Let the dead bury the dead, and the walls can't talk, but God can see. I think that's pretty clear in the biblical narrative. One of the things I'm always captivated by is in Ezekiel 8, God is bringing up Ezekiel it's like a wind up into the spirit, is what he says, and then he allows him to be able to see into the temple, and he carves a little hole into the temple walls. And it allows the prophet of God to see the priests of God performing these atrocious and unbiblical, lewd acts. And it's just a reminder from what we know from Luke 8:17 that nothing is hidden, that all will be revealed one day. And so I think you bring up a great point. But I still am really interested, and we're going to have to go to a break, but I'm still really interested to hear from you all. Why do you think individuals are looking past the allegations of Michael Jackson, some of these salacious, some of these despicable allegations and just evil acts that were perpetuated? What leads individuals to look the other way with that? I'd love to hear from you. So you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or you can jump over to Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. What you share online, we'll try to get to over air as well, but we're going to take a break, and so I'll actually be able to go over to Facebook right now and kind of go through some of these comments and some of the messages that you've left. So be sure to call in. What we're really interested in right now is knowing, why do you think individuals are overlooking some of these allegations with Michael Jackson? As for me, I think it's confirmation bias to a large degree. I think we're largely going to root for those that we love, and we're going to look over a lot because love covers a multitude of sins. And so I'll be interested to hear from you. We'll be back right after this.
Question: do you have a health insurance plan you are not happy with? Well, Bethany and Jason thought they were stuck. Their plan just kept getting more expensive, and Bethany's favorite doctor didn't even take that plan anymore. And then some friends at church told them about MediShare.
With our previous insurance, we were paying $1,200 a month. With MediShare, we now pay around $600 a month.
Yes, they're paying $600 less per month, and that's a pretty typical savings with MediShare, and they actually like MediShare more.
I was able to go back to my original doctor that I absolutely loved, and it's just been an absolutely beautiful thing being a part of MediShare.
Yeah, so they pay a lot less, and they like it more. No wonder MediShare is growing so fast. Find out more. They're super easy to talk to. All you have to do is call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, here with David Fraga on the Millennial Roundtable, talking about Michael Jackson, specifically about how I'm really interested in why individuals are willing to overlook some of the allegations that have been leveled against him and really romanticize them. And so we've opened up the phone lines. We've taken a couple of calls right now. Really interested to hear from you. Why are individuals willing to look the other way relative to the Michael Jackson allegations? Do you think individuals are going too far by wanting to silence him now, even though he's been long dead? So silencing him from the radio waves, or have they not gone far enough? Really interested on hearing your point of view. So you can call in 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212, or jump over on Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Okay, let's jump on over to South Carolina. We've got Edward in South Carolina right there. Edward, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, Edward. Clemson fan or South Carolina fan, first off?
Well, it really none of them, tell you the truth.
Good deal, good deal. Well, Edward, tell me your point of view.
My point of view, I just wanted to ask the question is because what I'm seeing here is why would people want to go back on something he done way back? Mm-hmm. You know, to me it doesn't make sense. Because it makes me feel like if they trying to down the man, trying to make him look bad, and that's the way it make me feel and seem like. But to me, if when he was living, why they didn't come up with all that?
Yeah,
he could answer all that.
Yeah, I agree with you to that point. Like these aren't new allegations. I mean, they are new allegations to the extent that both the individuals featured in the Leaving Neverland documentary have reversed their testimony that they gave in court, and they denied it at the beginning, but now they're coming back and saying, well, actually he did. But the allegations were already out there. Now they haven't been proven by a court, but they've always been out there. I just wonder now why there's the cultural reaction and what keeps people from not being horrified by it or just continue to romanticize him. I think that's what's so fascinating to me.
Yeah. So. It don't seem like because we all done something wrong, you know, in our life. We all done things wrong, and
yeah,
it just seems like people base stuff up against what somebody else has been going through. That's the way it make it seem. Because it seems like somebody else will go through this, and it just make it seem like, oh well, we look back and see, oh, this person doing that there too. So that's the way it make it seem.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree, Edward, especially from the biblical narrative. Well, I'll say this. I agree to the extent that we've all done something wrong. I disagree with just equating done something wrong with the idea of pedophilia. Again, like I said, there is a something dark. I don't know, or maybe it's just something just that stirs inside of me when I hear adults wanting to prey upon children. That does something primal inside of me that I don't want to go into detail, but it's just inherently wrong and it hurts me. And so let's continue to keep the question before us. Why do you think why is this causing such a big uproar now? Why are individuals overlooking Michael Jackson's allegations? We're going to jump on over to California right now. We've got Aaron in California. Aaron, are you there?
Yeah, I am. Hi.
Hey, Aaron, what's your point of view?
My point of view is this. You know, as a culture and as a society, we are quickly changing rapidly. And the majority, I feel, of Americans has rejected Christ and has rejected God. And when you reject Christ and you reject God, then your mind becomes depraved. And when it comes to pedophilia, that's a depraved mind. Let's face it, folks. This is evil. This is very, very evil stuff. Taking abuse, taking children into your confidence, taking children into your trust, and then molesting them or doing whatever you want with them. It's a horrible thing.
Yeah.
And it's evil. It comes right down to evilness. In our country, if we don't stand up against these allegations that are coming and believe these allegations and go, this is wrong.
Yeah.
Let's get justice. This is wrong.
Yeah.
Then we're going to really go down quick and fast as a society.
Yeah.
And we deserve it, too. And we deserve it because why? We disobey God. It's a disobedience to God. But God has given them depraved minds. Pedophilias have depraved minds. They will not change their behavior. I worked in a prison. They will not ever change. There's no drug to change a pedophile's mind. Let's face it. And that's my point of view.
Aaron, thank you so much for your point of view. You know, there is a point that here's the thing that is kind of the frustrating part, especially in light of the framework in which you put your response, is that tragically, and I mean that the truest sense, and I wish I could come up with a harsher word, tragically, this pedophilia is not limited to unbelievers. Pedophilia is run amok in the church. Well, run amok might be too strong a word. It is prevalent and present in the church right now. Hence the reason why what we're seeing in the Catholic Church, what we're seeing Southern Baptist, Protestant church, like it's everywhere. And so I'm shocked by it. I'm saddened by it. I'm frustrated by it. I'm maddened by it. I'm trying to figure out not simply how to sit in my anger, but how to work my anger out in a righteous way in order to protect those which God said he will tie a millstone around their neck if they cause one of these to stumble. And I want to put the question back at us. And so we're going to continue taking phone calls. Let's jump over to Mike right now. Mike's in Iowa. Mike, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. How are you?
Doing well, Mike. What's your point of view?
I was just kind of agreeing with you in the point you brought up earlier about, people held on a higher pedestal have lower expectations from people for some reason. And when you're comparing, like, a king of pop, Michael Jackson, somebody like R. Kelly, who honestly a lot of people don't even know who he is.
Yeah.
Like, he's not as well known.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot easier to get away with stuff when, you have a lot of other good stuff backing you. Like, he's a legend. He's brought so much music to the world, like dance, like insane amounts of like culture to like the music industry and stuff, compared to R. Kelly, who is a lot easier to hate, I guess is the right word for it.
Yeah.
Personally, I always thought Michael Jackson was creepy.
Mm-hmm.
From the allegations beforehand, he has like a whole ranch for kids and whatnot, and even though I liked his music, him as a person always rubbed me the wrong way. So, and I always thought it was kind of weird that it was right if the right person did it, I guess, is kind of the
what if they? I don't know.
The weird thing in this world, and I think it's just like and I think in this generation, like that stuff is coming more to light, and people are getting more punished by it, in like a sense of law. But at the same time, some people, you're innocent until you're proven guilty, or you're guilty until you're proven innocent. It really depends on who you are as a person.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, if Michael Jackson's not charged with anything, in their mind, they're like, well, why would I sway my opinion on Michael Jackson if, the law thinks that he's, didn't commit anything wrong?
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that's so shocking about this, Mike. And I don't know if you're familiar with some of the allegations that were put forward. It sounds like you were kind of alluding to it. Like, one, he has a ranch. And this ranch it wasn't built necessarily just for kids, but it was very conducive and very alluring to kids. Two, he had traps along the hallway to be able to alert individuals when somebody was walking down the hallway. Three, what these kids testified, and was proven to be true, how they testified about how he indoctrinated them to be able to say, if I was found, don't tell anybody, I won't tell anybody. If it comes out, your life is over, my life is over. For how, again, and I'm not going to be graphic on some of this, how they could describe Michael Jackson's body, these individuals in court to a T. Some of the material that was found in Michael Jackson's room, and how both Michael Jackson as well as these kids said that they slept in the same bed together, and to know that in this bed they're surrounded by this material that is lewd to the very core. Like, it's shocking how
accurate.
One, that this could not, like, doesn't shock our conscience, and two, how it's taken so many years now for us to be able to respond to it. And I just don't know. I don't know the appropriate response to it, because I think
I feel like people are just ignorant to the fact, in certain feelings, and that if something is wrong in any sense, it does not matter who committed it or where it happened in the world. It's wrong, period.
Yeah.
And people don't do that. They kind of put in like a chart and like, oh, this guy did it, so it's not as bad.
That's a great point.
This guy
So
did
he's
the
got
same
he's got
thing,
certain
so
things in
this
his
guy's-
ledger. He's got certain things on the positive side of
Exactly.
his ledger that allows us to be able to rationalize some of the negative thing. You bring up a really great point, Mike. Thanks so much for calling in. We've got to go to a break right now. I'm still interested, and it appears as though many of you still have a comment that you'd like to make right now. We've got quite a bit of phone calls, so be sure to call in 800-351-1212. We'll have to take a break. When we come back, more on Michael Jackson right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. 2 new cadets at the United States Military Academy at West Point do not want to wear the tar bucket. If you're not familiar with the uniform of West Point cadets, when on parade, cadets wear a plumed shako hat, or as they are commonly called, a tar bucket. The cadets object to wearing the hat because it would force them to remove their turban. That is a problem chiefly because the cadets are Sikh and the turban is a religious observance for the men. So while the United States Army has provided accommodation for Sikh soldiers in the past, this new lawsuit questions whether that accommodation need extend to the parade grounds. And it is an interesting question. Clearly, forcing the cadets to remove their turban would be, in the words of the cadets, blasphemous. Yet there is something to the tradition and uniformity found in the military dress of our nation's military academies. Congress, thankfully, has helped provide guidance in the settling of such matters. In the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, Congress insists that the government identify its compelling interest and restrict the free exercise of religion in the least restrictive manner possible whenever a citizen alleges a substantial burden to his free exercise of religion. RFRA does not guarantee an outcome in any case, but it does make the government justify its behavior. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Guide at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm just getting right here in my chair right before we get back on camera. We've been talking about Michael Jackson, specifically the backlash that's happening over the Leaving Neverland documentary. We have been taking some of your phone calls. It's just been so interesting to hear from you all, and want to continue to hear from you all your point of view relative to why you think individuals are overlooking this Michael Jackson, while there's such a strong, probably a better way to put it, why is there such a strong allegiance to Jackson despite the allegations that have been leveled against him? Really interested to hear your comments on that. And then if perhaps you don't have a comment on that, I'd be really interested to know how far is too far. Should we be leveling further punishment and penalty upon his estate are these Canadian stations right, and that we just need to completely silence him and need to move away from him. We've already seen some of this with R. Kelly. R. Kelly obviously is not as doesn't have as big a contributions as Michael Jackson in the pop culture music space. But what we do know about R. Kelly is that there are similar allegations of child molestation, sexual abuse that were in his past. And now what we're beginning to see is the backlash to the extent that Spotify has removed him from certain lists. There's been a pretty significant backlash relative to radio stations as well that have said that they're not going to play any more of his songs. And so we'd love to hear from you. 800-351-1212. That phone number, 800-351-1212. Facebook.com/Point of View Radio. We're going to continue taking some phone calls right now. Let's jump over to Gilbert in California. It looks like he's got a pretty interesting comment. Gilbert, are you there?
Yeah, I am.
Hey, Gilbert.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. What's your point of view?
Well, I just want to state that there seems to be somewhat of a camouflage type of I lost the word. And what I'm saying is there's like a double standard of what society wants to hold up certain people and certain items to the standard of that they've done something wrong. And the points I wanted to make was, the statue of Robert E. Lee and certain individuals who in our history books are recorded as people of reference who helped us form the nation that we know today, and also helped form the Constitution. I believe Jefferson might be one of these also, but the statues are being torn down, and the individuals, their past are being attacked because they're said to have been slave owners and things of this sort. And so I find it interesting that in the case of this individual, albeit, may he rest in peace, but it's that what he's been involved in. And I think because he's an icon in the music industry, and I'm going to attach that to Hollywood, that Hollywood standard that people hold themselves to, that call evil good and good evil, and I really believe that's what lies at the base of this.
Yeah.
What I was trying to say is a camouflage I lost it again. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think you got a great point. I think there is a double standard. I think we saw this. I mean, I think this is always on display in some of the award shows. You see this double standard that's played out from Hollywood and the rest of the world. But again, one of the things I continue want to go back to, because this is not just a Hollywood thing, right? Like this obviously it started in Hollywood, or it started at Neverland, but this extends outside of Hollywood as well. There's individuals around the country. I think I brought this up in the daily briefing when I sent it out this morning. There's individuals around the country that are continuing to turn the other cheek, turn the other side, look away from some of these allegations, despite how disgusting. I mean, it's just disgusting, calling it for what it is. And so I'm just really interested to hear from you all. How can individuals turn away from this? How do they turn away from this, despite knowing what the accusations are? Is it simply just his star power that has an ability to be able to cause individuals to say, well, he did a lot of good, and so I'm going to kind of lessen up on the punishment I think he's done bad? So let's continue to take some of your phone calls. We've got Angie in North Carolina right now. Angie, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Angie, what's your point of view?
Okay, my point of view, I had said it earlier, and I'm speaking to Christians.
Yes, ma'am.
Saved Christians. Now, our whole thought process and what we fall under is different from people in the world. We're in the world, but we're not of the world.
Yes, ma'am.
And the Bible said all have sinned and fallen short of his glory. And not that I'm making light of pedophilia, but to God, sin is sin. Here, we, the flesh, we have a habit of putting levels on sin. Oh, it's just stealing. Oh, it's just lying. Oh, it's pedophilia. But to God, sin is sin. And as a Christian, we don't judge as the world judges, because the Bible clearly tells us Christians, do not judge, for you will be judged. And the same measure that you judge, that judgment will be put upon you. And even if it's something that you stole, that measure will be put upon you, and God will expose you.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Your sin. God will expose you for your sin.
Heck yeah,
Rather
He will.
it's something that you've done and you think nobody, I just got away with it. Oh, I had an affair and I just got away with it. Nobody. God will expose you.
He
so
will.
as a Christian, we don't feel things, but this whole Michael Jackson.
Yeah. She was trying to, Angie was getting very passionate, and I completely agree with
Yeah,
you.
it doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter, but in the sense for the Christian, we don't judge. We don't get caught up in this whole hysteria with Hollywood. We pray because we don't know what's true, but God knows everything.
So
So
are you-
sometimes all of us, we get caught up. We got to get caught up. We have to come to ourselves as people of God and do what God commanded us to do. Pray. Pray. Don't judge. Pray, because that could be one of your kids one day. You don't know.
So we're just,
You don't
Angie,
know.
are you just saying we should pray and we shouldn't call out what Michael Jackson's done?
I'm just saying we don't get caught up in the whole the hysterical of it. We don't mix of it. We don't get caught up in judging because we don't know. We had the guy last month that said that he said he was going to the subway and all of this stuff was done. That turned out not to be true. We don't know. We weren't there.
Yeah, you're talking about the small.
And because we don't know, you know,
Yeah,
and even if we do know, that could one day be one of your children.
I think that's the reason why, like, I'm so passionate about it, Angie. Like, if I completely agree with you. I want to be held according to the standard by which I judge individuals, and I am more than willing. I'm more than willing for individuals to hold me to a standard that says we do not molest children. You don't like, and I think it's a larger.
You're right. Don't think I'm not saying I'm making light of it.
Yeah,
you don't
yeah.
molest children, but you know what? You don't steal. You don't kill.
I agree.
You don't lie. You don't covet. See, we can't get up to where our standards are level with the world. Our standards are level with God.
Yeah.
Sin is sin.
I think-
so we
and that's-
don't get caught up like that. We pray.
And that might be a
God
larger.
have mercy.
That might be a larger conversation too, Angie, to be able to engage in, just because it does seem as though in the biblical narrative, not all sin is created equal. I know a sin is a sin is a sin is a sin. Sin took Jesus to the cross, but it appears as though in the biblical narrative, certain sins, and so specifically sins against causing little ones to stumble, Jesus went to a greater degree and said that it's better that a millstone be tied around your neck and you go to the bottom of the sea than cause one of these little ones to stumble. And so I think we would take one, but again, I completely agree with you to the extent that I want to heed what the biblical narrative says about being gentle to restore my brother and sister in sin, but I'm also want to be persistent in protecting the little children that Jesus died for, and Jesus says is the coming of the kingdom. The kingdom of heaven is like these children. So I'm going to be insistent on protecting them, and I'm going to expect other individuals to protect them with me as well. We'll take a break, and we'll be back right after this.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or more importantly, if you sign up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare, and MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing program. It's been around for 25 years. They have more than 400,000 members now around the country. And get this, over the years, MediShare members have shared more than $2 billion of each other's medical bills, so they could help share your needs too. And best of all, you could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is around $500 a month. Your savings could be more or less, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have.
You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View on this Wednesday, March 6th. Wednesday being Ash Wednesday. So grateful that you have decided to join us today. I am Nick Pitts, the host of Point of View on this Millennial Roundtable, joined at the Millennial Roundtable for this last segment by David Fraga. We have been talking a little bit about a lot of it.
Yeah.
We started off during the first hour talking a little bit about immigration, specifically what was featured on both the New York Times and then the Washington Post front page about how there was an increase in immigrants that were coming across the border right now. Upwards of 800,000 are expected to cross the border this year, and kind of understanding, one, what is the implication for this, and two, what's a Christian perspective on it, trying to hold in tension the idea that we're to uphold the law, one, the need for us to be able, for authorities to be able to enforce the laws, and for Christians to be able to obey the laws, unless, of course, they contradict the laws of God, but then also understanding the tension that exists, and one, wanting to understand the rules of the law, but two, understanding the one that has come to give us the laws and has come to show us love, and how love hinges on all of the commandments, and the desire, one, for us to be able to extend compassion to the foreigner and the alien in our midst. And so what does that look like for us when a political narrative forces us to make a decision, choose between two, and the biblical narrative requires us to say, well, we got to do both. And so we explored that. And then here in the past hour, we've been talking about Michael Jackson. Now, we've been asking you all to call in, and I just need you to know you are you're listening, and we're hearing you and right now, and our producer is definitely hearing you right now, because there's quite a few phone calls right now, just because this has been this has just been a perplexing subject for me, especially from a millennial perspective. I was talking to David over the break, and I know Michael Jackson. I enjoy his music. Like I can't help but move whenever I hear ABC. Like I still sing along to The Man in the Mirror. Like these are songs that very much are, but I wasn't around when they were actually made. Like I wasn't listening to music at that time. And so I don't understand. I can understand it from a historical perspective, but from a kind of an anecdotal living in the midst of it, I just can't understand the cultural impact that Michael Jackson had during that time, which I think explains the rationale and the reason why certain individuals are willing to overlook some of the allegations that have been put out before him now, and now are reemerging because of this HBO documentary that aired on Sunday and Monday night, entitled Leaving Neverland, which is two individuals that are sharing their stories now of how Michael Jackson sexually abused them as they were children. And what I've been interested to hear from you all is, why do you think individuals are willing to overlook these allegations? I'm just perplexed by this. I'm confused by it. I'm saddened by it. And I want to understand it. And so we've been opening up the phone calls. Opening up the phone lines, rather. Continue to do so. You can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or you can jump over on Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. You'll see my face. Quickly move down the screen to where you can leave a question or comment, and then my face will go away, and then we'll try to interact with some of those comments and questions throughout the show. But nevertheless, let's continue on the phone line, shall we? So surveying, let's jump over to Georgia right now. We've got Jackie in Georgia. Jackie, are you there?
I am.
Hey, Jackie.
LA. I've just been listening to the conversations and just listening to you now. You know, I was a child in the 70s, preteen and a teenager in the 80s. So, you know, the whole hype, the music and the hype of Michael Jackson was more positive then, maybe with one exception. And, you know, growing up, all that we had heard about that was just sort of made you raise your eyebrows was the alleged abuse that Michael Jackson and possibly his siblings had with their father. And, you know, and at that time, those were the stories. If there was anything negative, that was the stories that we heard about. And so I'm just throwing this out there, just listening to the conversations. And I wonder if people are, you know, if when they hear things, even as bad as they know, I would hope that they would understand how bad pedophilia is. But I wonder if people try in their mind to justify that, well, the abused has become the abuser. In other words, it's almost a justification without, you know, it isn't right. But I wonder if that could be the thought process is, do they feel sorry for him, you know, from knowing the past? And is there this tendency to feel sorry? Because, you know, people watched him grow up. It's not like he came on the scene as a 20-year-old. He came on the scene as a child.
Yeah.
And he was, you know, and knowing now that there was the possibility that he was under this controlling, tyrannical thumb of a father who possibly abused them physically and emotionally, and I'm sure spiritually, you know, is that a possible reason why others would be willing to, I hate to say dismiss,
No.
you know, the concern over those allegations, but try to be more understanding.
Yeah, Jackie,
doesn't make it right.
I think you bring up a great point. I think that was one of my. I don't know if it's great minds think alike. I would hesitate to put your mind with mine. I would never want to denigrate you in that respect. But I think that's kind of like what I was working on, like this idea of confirmation bias. And I forgot about the documentary. There was a documentary as well. So not only did individuals grow up with him, obviously, hearing everything from ABC 1, 2, 3. To then blaming it on the boogie, to then seeing that Pepsi commercial. But then there was also the documentaries that came out, and I'm specifically thinking about the the VH1 documentary that chronicled his life and did show like a very hostile living situation and very harsh with Joe, the dad, that Michael was put underneath. And it to a large degree, and I think we saw this too with the death of Luke Perry, knowing the story and being familiar with him to a large degree does well up the pool of empathy and support that we do have for individuals, and it deepens that confirmation bias that we have. That's why I continue to contend that we are so supportive and so willing to fight for our family members, because we're so aware and cognizant and familiar with them, that it takes a lot for us to hear adversarial words or antagonistic words and accusations leveled against them just because we're so familiar with them and we have a bias towards them. And so I do wonder if you bring up a really great point, to the extent that many individuals knew Michael for so long. They were completely, like, they saw him from the very beginning. They saw him grow up. They literally saw him transform. Literally and figuratively, literally transform before their eyes. And so it did create a deep reservoir of support for him, which might be some of the individuals that have now continued to come out and say, we're overlooking this. If I'm looking at the ledger, there's a lot more, there's a lot of good, and the lot of good is more than enough to be able for us to overlook the bad. So, Jackie, thank you so much for your phone call. We've got to jump over to a break right now. But when we come back from the break, taking more of your phone calls about Michael Jackson. I just got to know, again, we'll go back to the original question. Why are individuals willing to look over the allegations leveled against Michael Jackson? And then I want to also know, if you have a comment or question that you'd like to make, what should happen now that everything like this is coming out even more so? Should we completely silence him from the radio? What do we do? We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, according to a new U.S. Census Bureau report, the millennial generation has been reversing some of the social trends that were true of previous generations. For example, about 1/3 of all millennials still live with their parents. They also apparently rely on them financially as well. The millennial generation is also postponing marriage, having children later, and buying homes later. Instead, they are pursuing education and various job opportunities. Many of these reverse trends have taken place recently. In 2005, only 25% of those between the ages of 18 and 34 lived with their parents. Today, that number is 34%. To put this in perspective, more people in this age group live with their parents than live with a spouse. Education is one reason for this remarkable change. Young women are much more likely to attain a college degree than just a few decades ago. They're also much more likely to have a full-time job. By contrast, young men are slightly less likely to be employed than in recent past. Another study done by the firm AgeWave in partnership with Merrill Lynch uncovered how much parents were financially helping their adult children. When mom and dad give their adult children $100 here and $200 there, it adds up. The average amount given is $6,800 annually. Some financial counselors suggest that parents reconsider this and instead shore up their own retirement nest eggs. Millennials are also marrying later in life. In 1976, 85% of women and 75% of men had been married by age 29. Today, only 46% of women and 32% of men say they were married before they turned 30. Instead, many more are living together. Cohabitation has grown 12-fold over the last 40 years. These trends show how the millennial generation is changing the world around us. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Thinking Man Films, Patterns of Evidence, The Moses Controversy. Did Moses write the first books of the Bible? Patterns of Evidence in theaters March 14th, 16th, and 19th only.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, here at the Millennial Roundtable for Point of View. So grateful that you decided to tune in with us. We have been talking about Michael Jackson specifically, taking some of your phone calls. Two questions that I continue want to go back to and want to entertain with you all and want to hear from you really are these two questions. First being, why is it some people are willing to overlook the allegations and the facts about what we know about Michael Jackson? Why are they willing to overlook those things and justify some of that behavior? The second is the question of should more be done, or should we just move on relative to Michael Jackson? And so I'm thinking in my mind right now, do I listen to Michael Jackson anymore based on some of the stuff that's come out now? Or do I need to strike him like these 3 radio stations out of Canada and 1 out of New Zealand? Do I just need to strike him because of what's happened in his past? And so I'd be interested to know, do we go further in punishment and continue to try to continue to bear this out and try to figure out how do we eradicate him from our lives now, even though he's passed away upwards of 5 years ago? Or are we just overreacting? We just need to move on, continue to enjoy his music, et cetera, et cetera. We'd love to hear from you. 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or go to facebook.com/Point of View Radio. You can leave a message or comment on the live video box. And so, for those of you that are on Facebook and then even on YouTube, when you leave a message, you can also leave a comment, or you can leave a message in the inbox, and we're getting some of those as well. And so one of the messages that I thought was pretty interesting is from Shirley on Facebook right now. what Shirley wanted to know is kind of the differentiation between the charges and between the allegations. And so what we know, Jackson was acquitted, I think, upwards of 13 accounts when he actually went to trial for some of these things. I know that there was a settlement upwards of $25 million with one particular family over these charges. But here's what we do know. And Vanity Fair had a great piece this morning, and you can find that on our website under the daily briefing. There was 10 undeniable facts about Michael Jackson. So what we do know about Michael Jackson, that's not allegations. These are undeniable facts. One is the reality that he did admit, and the boys admitted, upwards of 2 boys admitted, well, now 4 boys admitted that he had children sleeping in his bed. That's undeniable. 2, what we know to be true is that in his room where these boys slept, there was toys that were of the adult nature, as well as magazines and other paraphernalia of the adult nature, if you're catching what I'm throwing out there right now, that were within eyesight, and certain instances that were within a reach of the bed. 3, we do know that there was some type of DNA, some type of, I don't know if it was DNA, I don't know what substance that was found on these toys that was also from the boy as well as from Jackson. 4, what we know to be true is that in the hallway leading up to the bedroom, there were noises, there were traps, there were security protocols, so that when Michael would know when individuals were coming towards the bedroom, he would be alerted because of the system that was set up and that was in place. And so these are things that and there's 6 other things that we can know for certain, but those are things that we do know. Those are undeniable facts that have come out, that are verified, that were put forward. And so now, while the charges were acquitted, the 13 counts were acquitted in the court, those are what I just iterated. Those are undeniable facts. And want to hear from you now. Why is it that people overlook these facts and more when considering and enjoying Michael Jackson or standing up for Michael Jackson? And 2, another question, if you don't answer that, is this: do we need to go further? Should we punish him, or I guess his legacy, more, or are we just overreacting in this instance? Love to hear from you. 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212. Facebook.com/Point of View Radio. Let's go ahead. Let's stay here in Texas. We got Tony in Texas right now. Tony, are you there?
I am.
Hey, Tony, what's your point of view?
Well, my point of view seems to be the point is off today. I agree with you completely about everything about pedophilia and its wretchedness. I'm a pastor. I've had preschools, Christian Ministry of Awana. I'm 100% in agreement with all of that. But there's something about this whole approach that seems to be off base, in that one earlier lady mentioned justice. Well, the man's dead.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing else to be done. And that's, I guess, my problem with it is, why are we talking about a man who can't defend himself?
Mm-hmm.
I don't, if he went before the court and today with the evidence, I'm not saying he wouldn't be found completely guilty, but there seems to be something really unjust, kind of Proverbs 3:30, accusation against a man who's done wrong. And I don't know. It's like I said, I agree completely with the pedophilia. I just think it's a poor. My concern is if somebody's saying, man, they're attacking a guy who can't defend himself, why are they doing that? And they dismiss your whole argument and all your great comments about the wrong of pedophilia because we're doing this to a guy who's dead and can't defend himself.
Yeah.
So I would much rather the point today have been about that and about the issues and about those kind of things. But
I think one of the reasons why it's so prevalent is a couple of reasons, and I'd love to go back and forth with you on this. Like the first reason I think it's so important, like one, just because this is coming out with HBO, the documentary obviously is raising a number of questions. And so there's that particular point. And then the second point, especially what's happening right now in the religious sphere about what's happening relative within the Catholic Church and Protestant Church. This continues to be a motif and a theme, tragically, that needs to be addressed. Maybe like I completely agree with your insertion of Proverbs 3:30, but this is a problem that seems to needs to spotlight, not only to be able to identify wrong, but also to be able to shine forward. How can we move right without perpetuating them?
I agree completely. So let's talk about the Catholic Church, SBC, and the Protestants, and let's talk about it in something that's present and current day with names and faces that are current. Again, I'm not disagreeing at all with the importance of the issue. I think just the approach of HBO is certainly not the standard for Christians to operate off of. And so, I don't care what HBO does. I don't care how the public responds to it. I think we've got a different standard that we operate under. And it just seems to me, and that's just my point of view, is that we would have served the subject better to have addressed it in some other way than maybe just capitalizing on the popularity of the name Michael Jackson. And again, in some sense, to me, a very unchristian way to deal with it when a man's dead and can't speak in any defense. And the position of pedophilia is indefensible. But as far as accusations for himself and all of that, as you've said numerous times, 5 years dead makes the issue with him dead. But that's my point of view about it. I love what you guys do, and I just regretted that such an important issue that needs all the attention you want to give it was kind of crouched around this particular way of doing it, when I believe it has the opportunity to backfire and cause people to dismiss the whole argument because of the way it was poised.
Well, Tony, thank you so much for your point of view. Like, I really do appreciate it. I think one of the interesting things, though, that I want to come back to, especially there's an individual that has written in this space. He wrote a book called Blue Suede Shoes and argues about the power of personality in today's culture, in this kind of celebrity culture. And I think one of the interesting things that we're continuing to see is that these celebrities, we'll just say celebrities. I don't want to these them, if that's even a way to be able to phrase something. I don't want to other them, but I do want to say that they do tend to accentuate particular issues that I think illuminate a zeitgeist that's very prevalent in our culture today. So specifically, so if we tie this back to whether it's the Catholic Church, whether it's Protestant, whether it's Southern Baptist, whatever, what we see with Michael Jackson is very similar patterns to what we see happening in the religious sphere, in that we're seeing an individual that's done something wrong and we're rationalizing it. Not him, not her. They would never do something like, I can't believe him. So I think that's a prevalent theme that I'm very interested in continuing to explore and trying to better understand, because here's what I believe it to be true. Mark Twain said it best. History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And if we can identify the patterns in history, I think we have an opportunity to be able to move forward in a more healthy and prosperous way. And I would contend right now, it is not prosperous when individuals, specifically children right now, are being preyed upon. It is not prosperous when children are being preyed upon, regardless of the celebrity status of the individual that's doing the preying. How do we identify these factors to be able to highlight how we might not be able to perpetuate these patterns into the future? And as bystanders, what causes individuals to be able to look past these accusations? I think is very worthy of conversation. We'd love to hear from you. 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Facebook.com/Point of View Radio. When we get back, continuing the conversation of leaving Netherland as is illuminating here in our culture. We'll be back right after this.
From Thinking Man Films and Fathom Events comes Patterns of Evidence, the Moses Controversy. A new documentary follows investigative filmmaker Timothy Mahoney's faith-affirming journey throughout the Middle East in search of scientific evidence that Moses wrote the first books of the Bible.
The Lord said to Moses, write this in a book.
Patterns of Evidence, the Moses Controversy. In theaters March 14th, 16th, and 19th only. More information is available at patternsofevidence.com/Moses.
Is there a lot of free time in your schedule? Probably not. Most of us are on the go all the time, and Point of View is ready to go with you no matter where on the go is. Visit the App Store for your phone or tablet and search for Point of View Radio. Our app lets you listen or watch anytime it's convenient for you. And since we're told to be doers, not just listeners, the app provides a quick way to take action on the issues we're talking about. You can send us a question, find a local radio station, read articles, listen and share Kirby's viewpoints commentaries. It's a lot of impact in one little free app. Visit the App Store today, right now, and download the Point of View Radio app. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. So grateful that you have decided to join us this afternoon, or keep on joining us. I probably should say this afternoon. We have been talking about some of the allegations that have reemerged relative to the Michael Jackson abuse case that was litigated back in early 2000s, continued to surface, and now have reemerged due to HBO documentary entitled Leaving Neverland, where you have two individuals that have decided to switch their testimony, where saying they previously said that Michael Jackson did not treat them wrongly, did not abuse them, have now come out and said in this recent documentary that aired on Sunday and Monday on HBO, and said that Michael Jackson did, in fact, abuse them. And the response has been interesting, to say the very least. Canadian broadcasters, Canadian radio stations have silenced, certain Canadian radio stations have silenced him, I should say. There was a radio station out of New Zealand that has begun to silence him. And many are, I will say some are wondering whether this is going to have a ripple effect here in the U.S. And so with reference to what's happening right now with R. Kelly, for example, R. Kelly is a famous R&B artist, and he is an individual that has similar allegations that have been leveled against him relative to sexual abuse of minors, as well as sexual abuse of individuals as well. And Spotify, which is a popular streaming music service, as well as certain radio stations, have decided to pull R. Kelly from their airwaves and their selection because of the allegations. And many are wondering, even though R. Kelly isn't nearly the celebrity status of a Michael Jackson, will Michael Jackson suffer the same fate that R. Kelly is beginning to experience? But the question I've been posing to you all, and you all have had such interesting responses right now, and it's been helpful to think through this with you all, is why is it that some people continue to wash over? Why is it that some people continue to look past these allegations that have been leveled against Michael Jackson, to stand up for him, to speak up for him, to be able to look the other way relative to him? And then I'm wondering about that why question, and you all have been answering that. But I'm also wondering what should be done. Should Michael Jackson, should we silence him? Should I listen to his music anymore? Should I no longer blame it on the boogie? Is what I guess I'm trying to get at right now. I'll be really interested to hear from you. You can call in 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Facebook.com/PointOfViewRadio. And so let's go ahead and let's go to Elmer right now. Elmer, are you there?
Yeah.
Hey, Elmer.
I guess in response to your question, you've had a lot of callers and they've offered various ideas. I guess one, and you sort of hinted at it, the sort of tribalism that's in families, but tribalism in society at large is that either defends the people who are in its side of the river, or there's political persuasion, and that has in some respects is maybe a tribal response, a negative tribal response, I would say, because some people are judgmental and condemnatory, and maybe rightfully so, but maybe not. They're not so condemnatory when the challenge and the reality is against them on their side. So they don't want to castigate their own people, but they'll castigate the others. So that's itself another tribalism thing that goes on. And I guess I would say, I've noticed in my life that these kinds of things, just like the Me Too thing that came up, but things that other presidents have had in their past that came up were never exposed in the press or those kinds of things in their own lifetime, but subsequent to their office and that kind of thing. And now, so what Kennedy may have not, or Eisenhower may not, or Roosevelt may not have had pointed out to the public by the press and media that in Clinton's time and now in other aspects it's just with a fine-tooth comb. And so I guess that's just my observation. And I think over time these kinds of things, people are going to say, well, we're just going to have to cleanse the whole pie, cleanse everybody, and have these belly button watchers are going to have to suffer because we didn't admit the truth in the first place.
Yeah.
And we'll just have to suffer. And I mean, that usually happens, like what Warren Buffett says, when the tide goes out in the financial world or any other world, when the tide goes out, everybody's wearing no clothes.
Yep. Yeah, we're going to have to, we don't think our way out of this. We've rationalized our way into it. We don't think our way out of it. We've got to experience our way out of it. Elmer, you bring up a really great point. Like, I don't want to judge anybody based on a system that I'm not willing to be judged by. And I think it's a really low bar, just being completely honest. I I am more than willing for somebody to judge me if I were to transgress a command to treat children harmfully. Like I'm more than willing to submit to that level of judgment. And so there's that particular point. What I think is interesting, and I think you do bring up a great point, is that it's very selective in nature, especially because of the tribal nature of this. And so, and again, this is a different time, so it's hard to make these comparisons. So today, you can't go 24 hours without hearing about Stormy Daniels. Like you cannot go 24 hours without hearing about Stormy Daniels. Now, talk about John F. Kennedy, for example. That's where I did my PhD research on. This individual, he had a system set up in the White House to make sure Jackie O, when she was in the White House, would not interact with the woman that was there. Like, it's just a very different world that we're living in. But it kind of goes back to what you were talking about, though, is that we all have our particular tribes that we're a part of. And unfortunately, there's a sense that we're not willing to speak out against our own tribes out of like a survival instinct of some sort or nature, which I think is just so not biblical. Like, I continue to say this, and Kirby will he will remind me and he will echo it with me, is the idea, are faithful are the wounds of a friend. If I cannot gently restore my brother, if I cannot approach him about something that's wrong, whether that's my brother from a biblical perspective or whether that's my brother from an ideological perspective or a tribal perspective, if I'm not willing to call out my own side, then I need to quit calling out the other side by a judgment system, by a system in which I'm not willing to live. So I think you do bring up a really great point there, Elmer. Thank you so much for your call. Let's jump on over to Jim right now. Jim, are you there?
Yeah.
Hey, Jim, what's your point of view?
Well, I think at least in part, the willingness of people to ignore or defend bad behavior on the part of celebrities is tied to the breakdown of the primary relationships that we have in our society, breakdown of the family, lack of church attendance, frequently changing jobs, etc. And the celebrities are always there. And they're there when I'm having bad times. They're there when I'm having good times. I feel like they're speaking to my current situation. So when they get in trouble or accusations are made against them, I will have a tendency, if I've overly bonded with this artificial source, I will have a tendency to defend them just as I would a close friend or a spouse when an allegation is made. Oh, it can't be true. Or if it is, it wasn't that bad, and let's just move on beyond this, etc. It's a symptom of a culture that is very lacking in close interpersonal relationships, as opposed to projecting our needs onto, quite frankly, a fantasy.
That is a great point. I brought this up a couple of days ago. Because there's research out when Luke Perry passed away earlier this week, and it was a shocking reaction that we had when Luke Perry died. And there was a psychologist wrote an article that indicated that there's a differentiation that must be made between experiencing grief and expressing mourning. So when we go into a series of mourning, we're publicly expressing the sorrow that we feel. Grief is something that we experience. And what the article was getting at is this reality, like you said, we're so familiar with these people, even though they're not familiar with us, that has created this bond, this one-way bond that we have with them. That's just it's very interesting, and it's also very telling if you were to take that research and apply it and think and put that the framework by which we're understanding what's happening relative to Michael Jackson and how certain individuals are willing to overlook the allegations that have been leveled against him and the abuse that he's conducted in order to be able to highlight the good that he's done. Very interesting. Jim, thank you so much for your phone call. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we have got to take a break, and then when we come back from the break, we're going to finish up some of these phone calls, and then I've got a lightning round of stories that I want to get to you all, specifically one that has to do with tipping. But before we go, we're going to have to take one more break, talk about Michael Jackson, take a couple more phone calls relative to Michael Jackson, then talk about tipping. We'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. 2 new cadets at the United States Military Academy at West Point do not want to wear the tar bucket. If you're not familiar with the uniform of West Point cadets, when on parade, cadets wear a plumed shako hat, or as they are commonly called, a tar bucket. The cadets object to wearing the hat because it would force them to remove their turban. That is a problem chiefly because the cadets are Sikh and the turban is a religious observance for the men. So while the United States Army has provided accommodation for Sikh soldiers in the past, this new lawsuit questions whether that accommodation need extend to the parade grounds. And it is an interesting question. Clearly, forcing the cadets to remove their turban would be, in the words of the cadets, blasphemous. Yet there is something to the tradition and uniformity found in the military dress of our nation's military academies. Congress, thankfully, has helped provide guidance in the settling of such matters. In the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, Congress insists that the government identify its compelling interest and restrict the free exercise of religion in the least restrictive manner possible whenever a citizen alleges a substantial burden to his free exercise of religion. RFRA does not guarantee an outcome in any case, but it does make the government justify its behavior. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Guide at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, here for the last segment. And, you know, some of the comments that have been coming in, I just want you to know that there's bad that's happening in the world. Obviously, we've been talking about Michael Jackson specifically and just some of the allegations that continue to reemerge based on this Leaving Neverland documentary that was released on HBO on Sunday and Monday, and some of the fallout that's happened to that. But I want you to know there's been some really great stuff that's happening in the world that you might not know about. So, for example, I'll toot the horn of my institution that I'm a part of, Dallas Baptist University. We had Ross Perot Jr. on campus just yesterday. And Ross Perot Jr., if you don't know Ross Perot Jr., I would highly recommend you go to the DBU website, dbu.edu. He gave a lecture at the Christian Business Leaders Luncheon that was absolutely phenomenal. This man that has created hundreds of thousands of jobs is proclaiming Jesus and saying, I want to pursue after excellence in my field of business, but I refuse to forsake faithfulness in that pursuit as well. And how he is just blessing this world through his business. Absolutely captivating. And then this very moment right now at Dallas Baptist University, there is Dr. David Dockery is giving lectures, the Gallup Lecture right now, and is just presenting of David Dockery. When I think of the Lord's command to love the Lord my God with all my mind, David Dockery is that man. I had a chance to talk to him before I came on air, and he is a brilliant mind that is utilizing it in such a way that's making waves of grace for those of us that are available to read his material. And I'm exceedingly grateful for his leadership, for his mind, and just for his heart as well. So I know that we're continuing to talk about what's happening with Michael Jackson, specifically asking the question, why are individuals overlooking the bad that Michael Jackson has done in light of the good? Like, why are we willing to overlook that? But I want you to know, especially in this last segment, that there's good that's happening in the world. But we'll continue taking your phone calls right now. And so we're going to jump on over to Lori right now. Lori, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hi.
Hey, Lori, what's your point of view?
Well, I want to say I've always enjoyed Michael Jackson's music, and I think he's very talented. But, it does definitely affect me when I hear things about actors or performers and how they live their life or who they are. It makes me definitely not interested in wanting to, continue to listen to them or see them. That's just me. But what really kind of freaks me out about all this is, the parents in this situation of the children that these things supposedly happened to. I mean, they obviously believed this happened. They took them to court, but then they were given money and it just kind of disappeared. And I know for myself that if that happened to my child, there's no amount of money that would ever make it okay. That has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Money has nothing to do with resolving, my child, restoring my child's spirit, restoring my child's innocence, and the second question is, what were those kids doing there in the first place?
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of parent would allow their child to spend the night at a grown man's house because he's a celebrity?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just bizarre. And I just think that the parents should actually be investigated and possibly put on trial for this situation.
Yeah, I mean,
they're just as much, if not more so, to blame than Michael Jackson.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that came out is like even some of the parents I don't know if they testify, but I do know that it's come out. It's a known fact that these parents received gifts from Jackson. Not only did he have them over to his house and protect them, but he also gave gifts to them. Whether it was cars, whether it was jewelry, there's just a number of gifts that they received. And that even they were present in the
that makes me physically ill. I'm just devastated for those kids. I mean, they basically, the parents pimped them out.
Yeah.
I mean, who are you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just sad.
Well, Lori, thank you.
And so,
Go ahead.
thank you. Thank you for talking about these kind of topics, because it does need to come out. We do need to think about it, and we do need to, change society, because we've gotten way too far away from what's important and what's real.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Lori. Appreciate you. Appreciate your phone call. We're going to take one more phone call right now. And you know what? It's been so cold here in Dallas. I'm going to Florida. And so we're going to take Sakrina. Sakrina, is that how you pronounce your name down in Florida?
Yes.
Sakrina, where are you in Florida? And please tell me it's not 30 degrees there.
No, it's not 30 degrees, but it's 54 degrees. And I'm here in Marianna, Florida, what we call two-egg Florida.
Well, Sakrina, what is your point of view?
My point was similar to what the young lady was saying. When are we going to fault these parents? Because, the Bible tells us not to put our trust in no man. But for political reasons, or Michael Jackson, the preachers, whoever these people may be, when do we protect our children? To say, when we was growing up, you couldn't go to this house, that house, and that house. I didn't care. Mom didn't care who you were. But now we just letting our children just run rampant. It's like we have no love for them when we send them out into the wilderness or into the lion's den, y'all would say, because Michael Jackson was a celebrity. Even to, we'll say, Bill Cosby. All these women and these, even with the gymnastics situation, where are the parents? What are these parents doing? You should know your child when something is going wrong. When my children come home from school every day, I could look at one of them and tell, hey, how was your day? Something's wrong. What happened in school today? You should have a relationship with your child just as well as how we have a relationship with Christ to tell when there's something wrong with our children.
Yeah.
But I think, like you said, all the guilt and, he was with Michael Jackson or he was with R. Kelly, all this stuff, and we just let our children run wild. We have no cover over our kids no more.
Yeah.
Parents need to be parents. They're not praying with their children. They're not loving on their children. They're being more of their friends and just letting them run wild.
Yeah.
And when you look at the Bible, we're just in the last days. But as the man stated early, this man can't defend himself. He's dead and gone. Why do we want to bring this back up now?
Yeah.
We have to forgive that and let it go on. The parents took the money. I wouldn't even have took the money. I would have pursued that situation. But everything is about money, 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 and no dignity and pride about your children. No, I don't think that's right. I fault the parents.
Yeah,
I fault some of these parents.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sakrina, for your comment. You do bring up a really great point to the extent where were the parents, I think, is a very valid question to be able to ask, but especially just using this situation and thinking about it from a cultural standpoint, that today, that upwards of 40%, the number varies 40 to 42%, depending upon the research that you're reading, of children today that are born into unwed families. And so there's just many single parent families that these children are being raised in right now that I think is worthy of merit and consideration when we're considering moving forward with this. And then, too, just recognizing that what the internet is doing to us as our human psyche, and what we need to recognize is creating an appetite that will not be satisfied by staying on the internet. And so we've got to figure out, how do we get proactive about dealing with the problems that are on the internet? And two, how do we get proactive to be able to spot some of this behavior that is characteristic of these individuals that are preying on kids? And how can we as the church not simply just keep this from happening, but how do we create a culture that is pro-life to the very core, that saturates this culture with hope and with love, in order that children might just not survive, but might thrive? And that's my point of view. Grateful that you all have joined us, and we'll be back here tomorrow.
Question: do you have a health insurance plan you are not happy with? Well, Bethany and Jason thought they were stuck. Their plan just kept getting more expensive, and Bethany's favorite doctor didn't even take that plan anymore. And then some friends at church told them about MediShare.
With our previous insurance, we were paying $1,200 a month. With MediShare, we now pay around $600 a month.
Yes, they're paying $600 less per month, and that's a pretty typical savings with MediShare. And they actually like MediShare more.
I was able to go back to my original doctor that I absolutely loved, and it's just been an absolutely beautiful thing being a part of MediShare.
Yeah, so they pay a lot less and they like it more. No wonder MediShare is growing so fast. Find out more. They're super easy to talk to. All you have to do is call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.